The first injection hurt like hell, but pain was a small price to pay for survival. Jamie Chen had been administering the alpha pheromone enhancers for so long now that the ritual had become as automatic as breathing, every 8 hours, without fail, locked in whatever bathroom was available. The cocktail of hormones and scent amplifiers transformed his naturally gentle omega scent of rain and jasmine into something sharper, more aggressive. Something unmistakably alpha. His reflection stared back at him from the corporate bathroom mirror. At 5'11" with a lean, athletic build honed from years of competitive swimming, Jamie had the physique to sell the lie. Omegas were supposed to be soft, delicate, submissive. Jamie was all sharp angles and quiet intensity, with dark eyes that could freeze a room into silence. No one at Hartley Innovation ever questioned his designation. They saw the tailored suits, the commanding presence in the boardroom, the way he could stare down venture capitalists without flinching. They saw an alpha. That's exactly what he needed them to see. Working as the chief strategy officer for one of Seattle's fastest-growing tech companies required ruthlessness, and Omegas, no matter how competent, were rarely given positions of real power. They were secretaries, assistants, support staff. Never the person making million-dollar decisions in the war room. So Jamie had built his entire career on a foundation of carefully measured lies and pharmaceutical intervention. His boss was the problem. Well, not a problem exactly. The problem. Damon Hartley was the kind of Omega who made the world stop spinning. At 32, he'd built his company from a garage startup into a tech empire worth billions, and he'd done it with a combination of brilliant innovation and an almost supernatural ability to read people. His scent was intoxicating, warm vanilla and old books, the kind of scent that made alphas go feral with the need to protect and possess. But Damon didn't need protection. He was whip-smart, devastatingly beautiful, and completely aware of his effect on people. He wielded his Omega nature like a weapon, using society's underestimation of him to close deals and crush competitors. He was also, Jamie had come to realize with creeping dread over the past 3 years, the only person who really saw him. "Jamie, stop lurking by the coffee machine and get in here," Damon's voice called from his glass-walled office. Even from across the open floor plan, Jamie could see him. Black designer sweater, silver-framed glasses, that permanent expression of amused exasperation that meant he was about to give Jamie an impossible task. Jamie grabbed his tablet and crossed the polished concrete floors. Hartley Innovation occupied the entire 30th floor of a downtown high-rise, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. It was the kind of space that screamed success. "We've got a situation," Damon said without preamble as Jamie closed the door. "The Singapore expansion is falling apart. Their lead investor got cold feet about working with an Omega-run company. Shocking, I know." His voice dripped with sarcasm, but Jamie could see the tension in his shoulders. "I need you to go with me. We fly out tomorrow. 3 days of back-to-back meetings, and I need someone who won't try to protect my delicate Omega feelings while our company bleeds money." "I'll handle the logistics," Jamie said automatically, already pulling up his schedule. "I know you will. You always do." Damon looked up at him, and for just a moment, his carefully constructed mask slipped. He looked exhausted. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Jamie. You're the only person in this building who treats me like a person instead of a demographic." The words hit harder than they should have. Jamie nodded stiffly and escaped back to his office before he could do something catastrophically stupid like tell Damon that the feeling was mutual, that working alongside him had been the best 3 years of Jamie's life, that the scent of vanilla and old books was the only thing that made the sterile corporate world feel like home. The Singapore trip was a success. Damon's razor-sharp negotiating paired with Jamie's strategic planning convinced the investors that discrimination was bad for business. They celebrated on the flight back, Damon nursing a glass of champagne in first class while Jamie pretended to work on his laptop. "You know what I hate most about being an Omega in this industry?" Damon said suddenly, his words slightly slurred from exhaustion and alcohol. "Everyone thinks I got here by sleeping my way to the top. As if I didn't spend years teaching myself to code, didn't work 100-hour weeks, didn't sacrifice every relationship I've ever had." He laughed, but it was bitter. "My own father told me I should find a nice alpha to take care of me instead of playing entrepreneur. My father. The man who taught me to believe I could do anything." Jamie closed his laptop. They were alone in the first-class cabin, the flight attendants discreetly absent. You built something extraordinary. Anyone who can't see that is willfully blind. Is that your professional opinion, Mr. Chief Strategy Officer? Damon's smile was crooked, vulnerable in a way Jamie had never seen. That's my personal opinion, Jamie said quietly. Something shifted in the air between them. Damon set down his champagne glass, his gaze searching Jamie's face. You never talk about yourself. 3 years, and I barely know anything about you beyond your terrifying competence. Not much to tell. I don't believe that. Damon leaned closer, and the vanilla scent intensified. You're the most guarded person I've ever met. Sometimes I wonder if you're running from something. Or someone. The perception was too close, too accurate. Jamie should have deflected, should have rebuilt his professional walls. Instead, he found himself saying, I'm running from who people expect me to be. Damon's eyes widened slightly with understanding. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, and Jamie saw his own loneliness reflected back at him. Damon understood what it meant to be judged for your designation instead of your capability. He understood the constant performance, the exhausting vigilance. I'm tired, Damon whispered. I'm so tired of being alone. You're not alone, Jamie said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. Damon reached out, his fingers brushing Jamie's wrist where his pulse hammered visibly. Jamie. What happened next shattered every rule Jamie had built his life around. Later, he wouldn't be able to say who moved first. One moment they were just looking at each other, and the next Damon's lips were on his, and it was everything, relief and terror and coming home all at once. They barely made it back to Damon's penthouse apartment. Clothes scattered across expensive hardwood, hands desperate to map new territory, mouths sharing breath and want and 3 years of unspoken longing. In Damon's massive bed overlooking the glittering city, with silk sheets tangled around their bodies, Jamie felt the alpha enhancers fail. The intensity of an Omega's pheromones during intimacy, especially one as potent as Damon, overwhelmed his pharmaceutical disguise. His own Omega scent broke through, rain and jasmine, soft and undeniably submissive. He felt Damon tense, confusion flickering across his face, but then they were too far gone, too lost in each other to care. Jamie told himself he'd deal with the consequences later. He always dealt with the consequences. But in the breathless aftermath, with Damon curled against his chest, Jamie knew with absolute certainty that he'd just destroyed everything he'd spent years building. He left before dawn. Jamie wrote the resignation email on his phone from a 24-hour diner, his hands shaking so badly he had to retype it 3 times. Effective immediately. Personal reasons. I apologize for any inconvenience. He didn't sign it. He powered down his phone, dropped it in a dumpster, and started driving. He drove east, away from the ocean, away from the city, away from Damon's inevitable disgust when he realized his supposedly alpha CSO was actually an Omega who'd been lying to him for 3 years. An Omega who just slept with his boss under completely false pretenses. The betrayal was inexcusable. The scandal would be devastating for them both. Jamie ended up in a small mountain town in Montana called Silver Ridge, where the air smelled like pine and snow instead of salt water and coffee. He paid 6 months' rent in cash on a tiny cabin at the edge of town and told his landlord his name was James Miller, that he was a writer looking for solitude. The lie came easily. It always did. The silence was worse than any physical pain. No meetings, no urgent emails, no sound of Damon's voice cutting through the office chaos with that particular blend of humor and authority. Just Jamie in the mountains and the crushing weight of what he'd done. The nausea started 3 weeks later. He dismissed it as stress, as his body adjusting to the sudden absence of the alpha enhancers. Then came the exhaustion that left him sleeping 12 hours a day and still feeling like he'd been hit by a truck. His heat didn't come. Jamie stared at the pregnancy test in the cramped cabin bathroom, watching 2 pink lines materialize with the inevitability of a car crash. Positive. He was pregnant. An Omega carrying his Omega boss's children, the doctor at the free clinic would later tell him with cheerful obliviousness. Twins. The hysterical laugh that escaped him sounded deranged even to his own ears. It was cosmic irony of the cruelest kind. He'd spent his entire adult life proving that Omegas could be more than incubators and caretakers, and now he was pregnant with the children of the one person he'd never wanted to deceive. His first thought was clinical and cold, termination. He researched clinics in Billings, looked at appointment availability, prepared himself for the practical solution. But as the days passed and his hand kept drifting to his still flat stomach, the decision became impossible. These were Damon's babies. Half of them was the brilliant, beautiful man who'd seen past Jamie's armor to the person underneath. The man who understood loneliness and determination and the exhausting performance of survival. How could he destroy that? So Jamie made a new plan. He would raise the twins here, in this quiet mountain town where nobody cared about corporate hierarchies or secondary genders. He would be James the writer, the soft-spoken Omega who kept to himself. He would protect these children the way he'd protected himself all these years, with careful lies and iron determination. Meanwhile, in Seattle, Damon Hartley was unraveling. Jamie's resignation had arrived without warning, without explanation. One day his most trusted executive was there, the foundation of his entire operation, and the next day he was just gone. The phone number went straight to a disconnected message. The home address turned out to be a mail forwarding service. HR claimed they had no emergency contacts on file, no next of kin, nothing. It's like he was a ghost, Clara Kim, his head of HR, said helplessly. I've never seen personnel records this sparse. He passed every background check, obviously, but there's barely any personal information. No social media presence. No paper trail beyond his employment history. Damon replayed that night in Singapore over and over until it became a form of torture. He'd felt something shift, had sworn he'd caught a different scent, something softer, sweeter than the sharp pine and leather he associated with Jamie. But he'd been drunk on exhaustion and champagne and the desperate need for connection. Had he imagined it? Had he pushed too hard, crossed a line that made Jamie uncomfortable? The thought made him sick. You need to snap out of this, Thomas, his CTO and oldest friend, told him bluntly over lunch. You're going to board meetings in the same clothes you wore the day before. You're snapping at investors. Whatever happened with Jamie, you need to process it and move on. He didn't just leave a job, Thomas. He disappeared. People don't just disappear unless they're running from something. Or someone, Damon didn't say. Unless they're running from me. Maybe he had a good reason, Thomas said carefully. Maybe something happened that he felt he couldn't explain. The words haunted Damon. He authorized a private investigator, a discreet professional named Victoria Ross who specialized in finding people who didn't want to be found. I'm not trying to harass him, Damon explained, hating how desperate he sounded. I just need to know he's okay. I need to understand why he left. Victoria's investigation turned up almost nothing. Jamie Chen had covered his tracks with professional precision. Whoever he is, he knows what he's doing, Victoria reported after 6 weeks. The Jamie Chen who worked for you has essentially ceased to exist. Damon threw himself into work with manic intensity, but the company felt hollow without Jamie's steady presence. He started making bad decisions, taking reckless risks, showing up to press events visibly disheveled. The tech blogs that had once praised his business acumen now ran think pieces about Omega burnout and the pressures of leadership. He didn't care. The only thing that mattered was the ghost of rain and jasmine he'd smelled that night, a scent that haunted him in quiet moments. The break came from social media. Damon had developed an obsessive habit of scrolling through landscape photography accounts, looking at pictures of places far from Seattle. It was self-destructive and he knew it, but he couldn't stop. He was looking at a series called Mountain Solitude, Montana Edition, when his entire world ground to a halt. The photo showed a small-town farmer's market, all rustic charm and local color. In the background, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, was Jamie. He was wearing a heavy flannel shirt and knitted hat, browsing produce with the kind of relaxed posture Jamie had never once displayed in the office. But what made Damon's heart stop was the visible swell of his belly, round and pronounced and undeniably pregnant. Damon's hands shook as he zoomed in. There was no question. It was Jamie, and he was very, very pregnant. The timeline slammed into Damon with brutal clarity. That night. The only possible explanation. But that meant Omega. Jamie was an Omega. Everything crystallized with devastating clarity. The obsessive professionalism, the guarded privacy, the way he disappeared without a trace. Jamie had been living a lie, passing as an alpha in an industry that would have never given an Omega the position he'd earned. And when his secret was exposed in the most intimate possible way, he'd run. Damon felt 100 things at once: shock, hurt, betrayal, understanding, and overriding everything else, a fierce, protective rage at a world that had forced Jamie to hide himself so completely. And underneath it all, a desperate, aching need to find him and make this right. He was on Victoria Ross's doorstep within an hour. Find this town. Find him. I don't care what it costs. Silver Ridge, Montana. Population 847. The cabin was registered to a James Miller, but Victoria's surveillance photos confirmed it was Jamie, living quietly and alone, his pregnancy now in the late stages. He's due in about 6 weeks, by my estimation, Victoria said. The locals think he's a widowed Omega writer. A widowed Omega. The lie was both painful and telling. Jamie had created an entire false identity rather than risk Damon finding out about the pregnancy. The rejection implicit in that choice was a knife to Damon's chest. What had he done, what had he been, that made Jamie so certain he would be an unsuitable father? But Damon knew the answer. His public persona was carefully cultivated, the confident Omega CEO who needed no one, who treated relationships like business transactions, who prioritized success over sentiment. He'd built that reputation deliberately, armor against a world that wanted to see Omegas as weak and emotional. He'd given Jamie every reason to believe he would see a pregnancy as an inconvenient complication. He chartered a flight to Montana that night. Silver Ridge was exactly the kind of place Damon had spent his entire life trying to escape, small, provincial, where everyone knew everyone's business. He checked into the town's only bed and breakfast, ignoring the curious looks from the owner who clearly recognized him but was too polite to say anything. He found Jamie the next morning at that same farmer's market, moving slowly between stalls, one hand resting protectively on his swollen belly. He was breathtaking. The harsh corporate armor was gone, replaced by soft flannel and worn jeans. His hair was longer, his face softer. He looked peaceful. Happy, even, in a quiet way that made Damon's chest ache. And then Jamie turned, laughing at something a vendor said, and Damon saw the full extent of his pregnancy. The swell was pronounced, unmistakable. Twins, Damon realized with a jolt. Jamie was carrying twins. Their children. His and Jamie's children. Damon didn't approach him at the market. He needed time to process, to plan, to figure out how to fix this catastrophic misunderstanding. He went back to his room and paced the creaky floorboards, his Omega instincts screaming at him to go to Jamie, to protect and provide and comfort. But charging in wouldn't work. Jamie had fled for a reason. Damon needed to prove he was worth staying for. The next morning, he drove to Jamie's cabin. It was small but well-maintained, surrounded by towering pines. Smoke curled from the chimney. Damon sat in his rental car for 10 minutes, gathering courage he'd never needed for billion-dollar negotiations. Finally, he forced himself out and walked to the door. Knocked. The silence that followed felt like forever. Then the door opened a crack, and Jamie's face appeared in the gap. His expression cycled through disbelief, panic, and something that might have been hope before settling on grim resignation. Damon. His voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. You shouldn't be here. I'm not leaving, Damon said quietly. We need to talk, Jamie. Please. Jamie's hand moved instinctively to his stomach, a protective gesture that made Damon's heart clench. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then Jamie's shoulders slumped in defeat, and he stepped back, opening the door wider. The cabin was small but cozy, well-worn furniture, books stacked everywhere, baby clothes folded neatly on a chair. This was the world Jamie had built for their children, a world that deliberately excluded Damon. The hurt was a physical ache. How did you find me? Jamie asked, not looking at him. Social media. A landscape photographer captured you at the market. Damon stayed near the door, giving Jamie space. Why, Jamie? Why didn't you tell me? Jamie let out a harsh laugh. Tell you what, exactly? That your alpha CSO was actually an Omega who'd been lying to you for 3 years? That I'd been injecting myself with illegal hormones to pass? That I was stupid enough to let my disguise fail and got pregnant? His voice rose with each question, bitter and defensive. How did you think that conversation would go, Damon? You built your entire company on the idea that Omegas can be CEOs, can be powerful. How would it look if it came out that your second-in-command was a fraud? The scandal would have destroyed everything you built. And his voice cracked. I would have been exposed as exactly what society said I was. A liar. A manipulator. An Omega who trapped an unsuspecting CEO. You think I would have seen it that way? Damon asked, and he couldn't keep the hurt from his voice. What else was I supposed to think? Jamie's eyes filled with tears. My entire life, being an Omega has been a liability. Something to hide, to manage, to suppress. I built a whole new identity to escape it. You knew Jamie Chen, Alpha Executive. That person doesn't exist. The reality is an Omega who knows that people like you, brilliant, successful, powerful people, don't end up with people like me. You're supposed to find a perfect Omega from a good family, someone who can stand beside you at galas and enhance your image. Not your lying, pregnant former employee who couldn't even be honest about who he was. The words were like punches, each one exposing a wound Damon hadn't fully understood. Jamie's fear wasn't just about rejection. It was about a lifetime of being told he wasn't enough, that his designation defined his worth, that success as an Omega meant conforming to expectations he could never meet. Damon crossed the room slowly, telegraphing every movement. Jamie flinched but didn't retreat. Damon stopped in front of him, close enough to see the dark circles under his eyes, the way his hands trembled. You're wrong about me, Damon said softly. You're wrong about what I want. Yes, I built my company on proving Omegas can lead. But do you know why that mattered so much to me? Because every day of my life, people told me I should be satisfied with being someone's support system instead of building my own empire. They told me I was too emotional, too soft, too Omega to be taken seriously. I proved them wrong, but I did it alone, Jamie. I've been alone my entire life because I was too afraid to let anyone close enough to hurt me. He reached out slowly, giving Jamie every chance to pull away, and placed his hand on the swell of Jamie's stomach. The touch sent a spark of connection through both of them. Under his palm, Damon felt movement, a tiny kick, then another. Oh my God, he breathed, wonder flooding through him. The babies. Twins, Jamie whispered, fresh tears streaming down his face. They're twins. The reality of it crashed over Damon, not one child, but two. Two tiny lives that were half him and half Jamie, proof of a connection that had been real and profound even if it had been built on misunderstanding. I am not angry about this pregnancy, Damon said, his voice fierce with conviction. I am devastated that you went through this alone. I am hurt that you didn't trust me enough to give me a chance. But I am not, and never will be, upset about these children. He looked up at Jamie, letting every ounce of truth show in his eyes. I'm in love with you, Jamie. I think I started falling for you the first time you challenged me in a board meeting and made me rethink an entire quarter strategy. You were the only person in my life who never wanted anything from me except to do good work. You saw me as a person, not as an Omega CEO to be managed or manipulated. And losing you has been the worst thing that's ever happened to me. His voice dropped to a whisper. I didn't come here to blame you. I came here to beg you to let me in. Let me be a father to our children. Let me prove that I can be what you need. Please, Jamie. Give me a chance. Jamie stared at him, and Damon watched hope and fear war across his face. The walls were still there, but they were crumbling, brick by brick. A chance, Jamie finally said, his voice barely audible. Just a chance. To see if this is real. Relief made Damon's knees weak. He didn't kiss Jamie, didn't crowd him. He just stood there, his hand warm over Jamie's pregnant belly, feeling the miracle of their children moving underneath. It was a promise more binding than any contract. The days that followed were tentative and careful. Damon checked into the bed and breakfast but spent his days at the cabin, learning how to exist in Jamie's carefully constructed sanctuary. He didn't push, didn't make demands. He just showed up, day after day, proving his commitment through action rather than words. He went with Jamie to doctor's appointments in the nearest town, held his hand during ultrasounds where they learned they were having a boy and a girl. He assembled the cribs Jamie had bought secondhand, cursing at the incomprehensible instructions while Jamie laughed from the couch. He cooked, badly, and rubbed Jamie's swollen feet in the evenings and read every parenting book he could find on his tablet. And they talked. God, how they talked. Late into the night, with the fire crackling and snow falling outside, they peeled back layers of protection and shared the truths they'd spent lifetimes hiding. Jamie spoke about growing up in a family that saw his Omega designation as a disappointment, about the desperate measures he'd taken to be seen as something more than his biology. Damon talked about the pressure of being a successful Omega, about how his father had cut him off when he refused to give up his business to be some alpha's trophy mate, about the loneliness of being celebrated but never truly known. They were both survivors of a world that tried to define them by their designations. They'd both built armor so thick they'd forgotten how to let people in. One evening, about 2 weeks after Damon's arrival, Jamie had a false labor scare. The contractions were sharp and frightening, and Damon watched all color drain from Jamie's face. They rushed to the hospital, Damon driving too fast on icy roads, his heart in his throat. It turned out to be Braxton Hicks, strong but harmless. But watching Jamie on that hospital bed, looking small and vulnerable in a way his corporate persona had never allowed, Damon felt something fundamental shift inside him. This wasn't about second chances or proving himself worthy. This was about family. About building something real and lasting with the one person who'd ever truly understood him. "I was so scared," Damon admitted later, back at the cabin, his hand resting on Jamie's belly. "I've never been that terrified in my life." "Welcome to parenthood," Jamie said wryly, but his eyes were soft. "We're not even at the hard part yet." Damon leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to Jamie's stomach. "Hey in there," he murmured to the twins. "It's Dad. Your other dad and I had kind of a rough start, but we're figuring it out. I promise you both, I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me." Jamie's hand came up to thread through Damon's hair, and when Damon looked up, he saw tears streaming down Jamie's face. But he was smiling, really smiling, in a way Damon had never seen. "I love you," Jamie whispered. "I think I've loved you since you first asked for my honest opinion instead of the answer you wanted to hear. I was just too scared to admit it." Damon surged up and kissed him, and it was nothing like that desperate night in Seattle. This was soft and sweet and full of promise. It was a kiss that said, "We're home now. We're safe. We're together." They decided to stay in Silver Ridge until after the babies were born. Damon worked remotely, taking video calls from the cabin with Montana mountains visible through the windows while tech blogs speculated about his wellness retreat. Clara handled the Seattle office with terrifying efficiency, and if she suspected the real reason for Damon's extended absence, she was professional enough not to ask. Their life settled into a rhythm that felt both strange and natural. Morning walks when Jamie felt up to it, Damon's hand always hovering protectively near. Afternoons reading side by side, Damon working through code while Jamie devoured parenting books. Evenings cooking together. Well, Jamie coached while Damon tried not to burn things. The domesticity of it should have been stifling for two people who'd built careers on ambition and power. Instead, it felt like finally being allowed to breathe. One snowy night, curled together on the couch with Jamie's head resting on Damon's shoulder, Jamie said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Damon's hand stilled where it had been tracing lazy patterns on Jamie's arm. "Okay. I was so convinced I had to be an alpha to matter. To be taken seriously. To be worth something in the business world." Jamie's voice was thick with emotion. "I spent so much energy hiding who I was that I forgot how to just exist. You gave me that back. You saw through all my defenses to the person underneath, and you loved me anyway. Both of me. The alpha executive and the omega father. That's a gift I don't think I can ever repay." "You already did," Damon said, pulling him closer. "You gave me someone real in a world full of performance. You challenged me, supported me, saw me as more than my designation or my company. You gave me a family, Jamie. That's everything." The twins were born on a Tuesday in early spring, 6 weeks after Damon had shown up on Jamie's doorstep. The labor was long and difficult, and Damon held Jamie's hand through every contraction, murmuring encouragement and love and promises. When the doctor finally placed a squalling, perfect baby boy in Jamie's arms, followed minutes later by a smaller but equally furious baby girl, Damon felt his entire world reorganize itself around these 4 pounds of humanity. "They're perfect," he breathed, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his children, his son with Jamie's dark eyes, his daughter with a shock of black hair. "You're perfect." Jamie, exhausted and overwhelmed and more beautiful than Damon had ever seen him, smiled up at him. "We did it." "We did," Damon agreed. "And we're going to keep doing it. Together." They named the twins Ethan and Lily. For the first few weeks, their world contracted to the size of the cabin, a blur of diaper changes and nighttime feedings and the overwhelming love that came with watching these tiny humans exist. Damon proved surprisingly adept at swaddling, while Jamie's strategic mind applied itself to feeding schedules and sleep training with the same intensity he'd once used for corporate planning. Clara flew out to meet the babies when they were a month old, took one look at Damon cradling his daughter while Jamie fed their son, and said, "I give it 6 months before you're both insane from the isolation and begging to come back to civilization." She was right, of course. By the time the twins were 4 months old, the cabin felt less like a sanctuary and more like a prison of baby supplies and cabin fever. They sat down one evening after putting Ethan and Lily to bed and had the conversation they'd been avoiding. "I miss the work," Jamie admitted. "Not the hiding, not the performance. But the actual work, the strategy, the problem-solving, the feeling of building something." "Me too," Damon said. "And much as I love this place, the twins deserve more than one general store and a town with 3 stoplights. So we go back to Seattle," Jamie said slowly. "Together. No more hiding. I come out as an Omega. We come out as whatever we are. Partners," Damon said firmly. "In business and in life. If you want that. I know it's complicated with the company dynamics and—" Jamie kissed him, soft and sure. "I want that. I want all of it. The complicated and the scary and the public and the real. I want to build something with you that doesn't require hiding any part of myself." They moved back to Seattle when the twins were 5 months old. Damon's return was met with enormous media interest, but he controlled the narrative from the start. At a carefully staged press conference, he stood beside Jamie, who looked every inch the powerful executive despite the baby carrier strapped to his chest, and told their story. Not all of it, some things were private, but enough. "This is Jamie Chen, my partner in business and in life," Damon said to the assembled reporters. "He's also the father of my children and, as of last week, Hartley Innovation's new chief operating officer. Yes, he's an Omega. Yes, we're both Omegas. No, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we're building a company that values talent and innovation over arbitrary biological classifications. If that's a problem for our investors or our clients, they're welcome to find another tech company. There are plenty. But they won't find one better than ours." The tech press ate it up. Some investors did flee, but more came in, attracted by the boldness and the positive publicity. Within 6 months, Hartley Innovation's value had doubled, and they'd been approached by 3 separate venture capital firms wanting to fund international expansion. But more important than any of that was the life they built. A house in the suburbs with a yard for the twins to play in. Weekend mornings when Damon cooked pancakes while Jamie fed Lily her bottle and Ethan babbled happily in his high chair. Board meetings where they finished each other's thoughts and challenged each other's assumptions, where their Omega perspectives were assets rather than liabilities. Sometimes, late at night when the babies were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Damon would find Jamie standing at the window, looking out at Seattle's skyline. "Thinking about Montana?" Damon would ask, wrapping his arms around Jamie from behind. "Sometimes," Jamie admitted. "It was peaceful there. Simple. We can go back," Damon offered. "Buy a vacation house. Spend summers there. Let the kids grow up with mountains and city both." "I'd like that," Jamie said, leaning back into his embrace. "But you know what I love most?" "What?" "This. Us. Not having to choose between who I am and what I do. Getting to be your partner and the twins' father and a damn good executive all at once. You gave me that, Damon. You gave me permission to be whole." Damon pressed a kiss to his temple. "We gave each other that. You showed me that love doesn't make you weak, it makes you stronger. That letting people in isn't losing control, it's choosing trust." As if on cue, Ethan started crying from the nursery, followed immediately by Lily. They both laughed, the moment broken by the beautiful chaos of parenthood. "Your turn," Jamie said, pulling away with a grin. "Our turn," Damon corrected, taking his hand. "Always our turn." They walked down the hallway together, toward their children and their future and the messy, complicated, absolutely perfect life they'd built from secrets and second chances. Jamie had spent so long hiding who he was, convinced that his Omega nature made him less. But here, now, with Damon's hand in his and their children waiting for them, he finally understood, he'd never been hiding his weakness. He'd been protecting his greatest strength, his capacity to love, to nurture, to build something real in a world that valued performance over truth. And he would never hide it again.
If you enjoyed this emotional journey of hidden identities, second chances, and finding love in unexpected places, please hit that like button and subscribe for more boys love romance stories. Drop a comment and let me know, would you have told the truth sooner, or do you understand why Jamie ran? Your thoughts fuel these stories, so don't be shy. And if you want to see more Omega Alpha dynamics with unique twists, let me know.
Part 2, The Complications. Life had a way of making you pay for happiness, Jamie learned. For 6 blissful months, everything felt almost too perfect. The company thrived, the twins grew from helpless infants into curious, babbling tornadoes of energy, and his relationship with Damon deepened into something that felt unshakable. They'd survived the worst, the lies, the separation, the fear. What could possibly threaten them now? The answer came in the form of a certified letter delivered to Hartley Innovations headquarters on a gray October morning. Jamie was in his office, reviewing quarterly projections while simultaneously video calling with Lily's pediatric Ian about her persistent ear infection, when his assistant knocked urgently. "Mr. Chen, there's a lawyer here. He says it's urgent and extremely time-sensitive." Jamie's stomach dropped. In his experience, lawyers bearing urgent news were never harbingers of good things. "Give me 5 minutes to finish this call." The man who entered his office 7 minutes later was everything Jamie expected: sharp suit, sharper eyes, and a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Mr. Chen, my name is Richard Pemberton. I represent the estate of Marcus Chen." The name hit Jamie like a physical blow. Marcus Chen. His father. They hadn't spoken in over a decade, not since Jamie had left home at 18 after one fight too many about his disappointing life choices. "I wasn't aware my father had passed," Jamie said carefully, his executive mask sliding into place even as his heart raced. 3 weeks ago. Heart attack. It was quite sudden. Pemberton opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency. "I'm here because of his will. Mr. Chen left specific instructions regarding his estate, and you're named as a primary beneficiary. However, there are conditions." Of course there were. Marcus Chen had never done anything without strings attached. Pemberton slid a thick document across the desk. "The short version: your father amassed considerable wealth, approximately $40 million in assets, including property, investments, and a controlling stake in Chen Manufacturing. He's left it all to you, with one requirement. You must take over as CEO of Chen Manufacturing within 90 days and run it for a minimum of 3 years. If you refuse or fail to meet this requirement, the entire estate goes to the Riverside Country Club where he played golf." Jamie stared at the lawyer, then at the document, then back at the lawyer. "You're joking." "I assure you, I am not. Your father was quite specific. He believed you had, and I quote, wasted your potential playing second fiddle to some Omega CEO in Seattle. He wanted to give you the opportunity to prove yourself by running a real company." The condescension in his dead father's words was so familiar it almost made Jamie laugh. Even from beyond the grave, Marcus Chen couldn't resist one last manipulation. "Chen Manufacturing is in Pennsylvania. I have a life here. A family. A career. I'm aware. The will stipulates that you must relocate and take active, on-site control of the company. Your father was quite clear, this is his final test. Pass it, and you inherit everything. Refuse, and it all goes to charity." Pemberton's expression suggested he found the whole thing distasteful but was bound by professional obligation to deliver the message. "You have 2 weeks to decide. If you accept, you'll need to assume control by January 1st. After Pemberton left, Jamie sat in his office for 20 minutes, staring at the Seattle skyline through his window. $40 million. The kind of money that could secure his children's future, pay for the best schools, eliminate every financial worry. The kind of money that represented his father's validation, even if it came wrapped in one last attempt at control. It was also 3 years away from Damon, from Hartley Innovation, from the life they'd built. He found Damon in the lab, sleeves rolled up, arguing animatedly with their lead developer about code architecture. The sight of him, passionate, brilliant, completely in his element, made Jamie's chest ache. "We need to talk," Jamie said quietly. Something in his tone made Damon's smile fade. He excused himself and followed Jamie to the private conference room. What's wrong? Is it the twins? Are they? They're fine. This is about my father. Jamie explained the situation, watching Damon's expression cycle through surprise, confusion, and finally, understanding. $40 million, Damon said slowly. That's a life-changing amount of money. It is. But it means 3 years in Pennsylvania. Away from here. Away from me and the company we built together. Damon's voice was carefully neutral, but Jamie could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched into fists. What are you going to do? I don't know, Jamie admitted. Part of me wants to tell my father's estate to shove it. He was a terrible father who made my childhood miserable and never once accepted me for who I was. Why should I dance to his tune now? But? Damon prompted gently. But it's $40 million, Damon. That's the twins' college funds. That's generational wealth. That's security I never had growing up. Jamie ran a hand through his hair, frustration bleeding into his voice. And maybe there's a part of me that wants to prove I could do it. Run a company on my own terms. Show that I'm more than just your COO, more than someone who needs to hide behind someone else's vision. The words hung in the air between them, and Jamie saw the exact moment they landed. Damon's face went carefully blank, which was always worse than anger. Is that what you think you are? Someone hiding behind me? Damon's voice was quiet, dangerous. No. That came out wrong. Jamie struggled to articulate the complicated tangle of emotions. You saved me, Damon. You found me when I was running, you accepted all of me, you made me believe I could be whole. But sometimes I wonder if I'm using you as a shield. If I'm still hiding, just in a different way. That's bullshit. Damon's omega scent spiked with hurt and anger, the vanilla turning acrid. We're partners. Equals. You're not hiding behind me, we're building something together. Or at least I thought we were. We are. We were. I don't know anymore. Jamie's own emotions were spiraling, the shock of the day catching up with him. This is exactly the kind of opportunity one would have killed for 10 years ago. My own company, complete control, a chance to prove myself on my own terms. And now it's here, and all I can think about is how much it would cost me. Then don't take it, Damon said, but his voice had gone cold. Problem solved. It's not that simple. It actually is that simple, Jamie. Damon stood up, his movements sharp. You either want to be here with me and our children, building what we started, or you want to run off to Pennsylvania to win your dead father's approval. Those are your choices. And honestly, the fact that you're even considering it tells me everything I need to know about where I stand in your priorities. That's not fair. Isn't it? Damon turned back, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. I gave up my company's exclusive claim to you when you became COO. I shared my business, my life, my children. I made myself vulnerable in ways I swore I never would again. And at the first opportunity to leave, you're talking about how maybe you've been hiding behind me. Like what we built together doesn't count because it has my name on the building. Damon. I need some air. Damon walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. Think about what you really want, Jamie. Because I won't be second choice. Not again. I did that my whole life with my father, always competing with the company for his attention. I won't build a family on that foundation. He left, and Jamie stood alone in the conference room, the weight of an impossible decision crushing down on him. That night was the first time they slept in separate rooms since moving back to Seattle. Damon took the guest room without a word, and Jamie lay in their bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the distance between them like a physical ache. The twins sensed the tension. Ethan became clingy and fussy, while Lily refused to sleep, her dark eyes, so like Jamie's, seeming to ask what was wrong with her parents. Jamie walked the hallway with her at 2 a.m, humming softly, and found Damon doing the same with Ethan at the other end. They met in the middle, two exhausted parents with matching circles under their eyes, and for a moment the argument fell away. They were just two people who loved their children and didn't know how to fix what was breaking between them. I don't want to lose you, Jamie whispered over Lily's downy head. Then don't leave, Damon replied simply, swaying gently with Ethan. But it wasn't that simple, and they both knew it. Jamie spent the next week in agony, researching Chen manufacturing, running financial projections, lying awake at night playing out every possible scenario. The company was solid, not innovative like Hartley, but profitable and stable. He could run it. The question was whether he should. He called his old mentor from business school, a sharp-tongued woman named Patricia who'd never sugarcoated anything in her life. "Let me get this straight," Patricia said after he explained the situation. "Your emotionally abusive father, who rejected you for being an Omega, is offering you $40 million from beyond the grave if you abandon your partner and children for 3 years to run his boring manufacturing company." When you put it that way. There is no other way to put it, Jamie. This is a trap. Your father is trying to control you even in death, trying to prove that you'll sacrifice everything for his approval. Patricia's voice softened slightly. You spent your whole life trying to be enough for him. When does it end? When do you decide that what you've built for yourself is more valuable than what is dangling in front of you? It's $40 million, Pat. And? You're already wealthy. Your partner is a billionaire. Your children will never want for anything. This isn't about money, it's about validation from a man who never gave it to you when it mattered. She paused. I'm going to tell you something my mother told me when I was trying to decide between a partnership at a prestigious firm and starting my own practice. She said, at the end of your life, no one's going to remember how much money you made or what titles you held. They're going to remember whether you showed up for the people who loved you. After the call, Jamie sat in his home office, Patricia's words echoing in his head. He looked at the photos on his desk, Damon laughing as Ethan smashed birthday cake into his face, Lily taking her first steps, the four of them at the park looking like an ordinary, happy family. When had ordinary happiness become something he was willing to gamble? He found Damon in the nursery, reading to the twins before bed. They were curled up on either side of him, Ethan sucking his thumb, Lily clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Damon's voice was soft and soothing, bringing the story to life, and all three of them looked so peaceful that Jamie almost didn't want to interrupt. But he cleared his throat softly, and Damon looked up. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Jamie saw his whole future. It wasn't in Pennsylvania running some legacy company. It wasn't improving anything to his dead father. It was right here, in this room, with this man and these children. I'm not taking it, Jamie said quietly. Damon's expression didn't change. You're sure? I'm sure. I'm going to tell Pemberton tomorrow that he can give the whole estate to the country club. I don't need my father's money or his approval. Jamie stepped into the room, kneeling beside the rocking chair. I need this. You, them, us. I need what we built together, and I'm sorry it took me a week to figure out what should have been obvious from the start. Daddy made Daddy sad, Lily observed with a toddler's brutal honesty, patting Damon's cheek. A little bit, Damon admitted, but he was looking at Jamie, and some of the ice in his eyes was thawing. But I think Daddy is going to fix it. I'm going to try. Jamie reached for Damon's free hand. I'm sorry. You were right, it wasn't about the money. It was about me still looking for validation from someone who never valued me. But I don't need his approval anymore. I have yours. I have theirs. He looked at the twins. I have a family that I chose and that chose me back. That's worth more than any inheritance. Damon studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. But Jamie, if something like this happens again, I need you to talk to me first. We're partners. That means we make big decisions together, not separately. You're right. I should have come to you immediately instead of spiraling. Jamie squeezed his hand. I'm still learning how to be part of a team instead of doing everything alone. Be patient with me? Always. Damon leaned down and kissed him softly, earning simultaneous responses from both twins that made them both laugh. Jamie called Pemberton the next morning and declined the inheritance. The lawyer sounded almost relieved. Between you and me, Mr. Chen, I think you made the right choice. Your father was a difficult man, and I suspect this whole arrangement was designed to disrupt your life rather than enhance it. I suspect you're right, Jamie agreed. But the universe, it seemed, wasn't done testing them yet. 2 weeks later, a story broke in Tech Insider magazine, Hartley Innovation's secret romance. Did Omega CEO Damon Hartley promote his partner over more qualified candidates? The article was a hatchet job, insinuating that Jamie's position as COO was the result of nepotism rather than merit, that his previous role as an alpha executive had been fraudulent, and that Hartley Innovation's success story was actually a tale of favoritism and deception. It dredged up Jamie's history of using alpha enhancers, framed his decision to hide his designation as evidence of a deceptive character, and included anonymous quotes from former employees claiming the workplace had become hostile to non-Omega executives. The story went viral. Within 24 hours, it was trending on every social media platform, spawning think pieces about Omega privilege, corporate ethics, and whether two Omegas could effectively run a major tech company without bias. "This is orchestrated," Clara said grimly at the emergency board meeting they called. "Someone fed them this story, probably someone with access to Jamie's old employment records. The timing, right after you declined your father's estate, suggests they knew about that too. Who would benefit from destroying our reputation?" Damon asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. "Your competitors. Investors who want you to fail so they can buy in cheap. Anyone threatened by two Omegas succeeding at this level." Clara pulled up a chart showing their stock price, which had plummeted 15% since the story broke. "We need to control the narrative before it controls us." Jamie had been silent throughout the meeting, his mind working through the implications. "It's my fault. I'm the liability here. If I step down as COO, issue a statement about learning and growing, maybe the focus shifts." "Absolutely not," Damon cut him off. "We don't negotiate with character assassination. You earned your position. Every decision you've made has been brilliant. The company's valuation tripled after you came on board. That's not nepotism, that's talent. But the optics. The optics are that we let bigots dictate how we run our company if we give in to this." Damon's jaw was set in that stubborn line Jamie knew meant he wouldn't budge. "We fight back. Together." They held a joint press conference the next day. Jamie stood at the podium with Damon beside him, facing a sea of reporters who looked hungry for blood. "I'd like to address the recent allegations directly," Jamie began, his voice steady despite the cameras and microphones. "Yes, I used alpha enhancers earlier in my career to hide my Omega designation. I did so because I knew, correctly, that I would not be given opportunities based on my actual qualifications if my true designation was known. Was that deceptive? Yes. Was it necessary in an industry that systematically discriminates against Omegas? Also yes." He saw some reporters nodding, others scribbling furiously. "When I joined Hartley Innovation, I was still hiding. Damon Hartley hired Jamie Chen, Alpha executive based on my resume and my interview performance. He didn't know I was an Omega. Our personal relationship developed later, and yes, it complicated our professional dynamic. But here are the facts. Since I became COO, Hartley Innovation's revenue has increased 200%. We've expanded into 4 new markets. Our employee satisfaction scores are at an all-time high. Our innovation pipeline is the strongest it's ever been. Those are measurable results, not favoritism." Damon stepped up beside him. "I'd also like to address something that's been implicit in much of the coverage, the assumption that two Omegas can't effectively run a company without bias. That assumption is itself rooted in the same discrimination that forced Jamie to hide who he was for years. If I were an Alpha CEO with an Alpha COO, no one would question whether we promoted based on merit. The scrutiny we're facing is because people are still uncomfortable with Omegas in positions of power." "Mr. Chen," a reporter called out, "do you regret your decision to hide your designation?" Jamie considered the question carefully. "I regret that I felt it was necessary. I regret living with that constant stress and fear. But I don't regret surviving in a system that was designed to exclude me. I did what I had to do, and I won't apologize for that. Mr. Hartley, some people are saying you should step down as CEO given these ethical questions. Those people can submit a formal vote of no confidence at the next shareholder meeting," Damon replied coolly. "I look forward to defending our record with actual data rather than innuendo and anonymous sources." The press conference didn't end the controversy, but it shifted the conversation. Opinion pieces started appearing defending their position, written by other Omega executives who'd faced similar discrimination. Several major investors issued statements of support. Their employees organized a demonstration outside the building, holding signs that read "Merit over Mythology" and "Omega Excellence." But the damage was done to their personal lives in ways the public never saw. The stress affected everything. Jamie developed stress-induced insomnia, lying awake at night replaying every decision, every conversation, wondering if he'd somehow caused this. Damon threw himself into work with manic intensity, trying to prove through sheer force of will that they deserved their success. The twins suffered most. With both parents distracted and tense, Ethan started having tantrums, and Lily developed separation anxiety that made drop-off at daycare a tear-filled ordeal every morning. It was Clara who finally intervened, showing up at their house unannounced on a Saturday morning 3 weeks into the crisis. "You both look like hell," she announced, pushing past them into the living room where toys were scattered in chaotic piles and laundry was overflowing from baskets. "When was the last time either of you slept more than 4 hours?" "We're managing," Damon said defensively. "You're drowning, and it's affecting the company. More importantly, it's affecting those two." She pointed at the twins, who were watching cartoons with the glazed-over expression of children who'd been in front of screens too long. "You need to take a step back. Both of you. Go on vacation. Remember why you're fighting for this life in the first place." "We can't just leave during a crisis," Jamie started. "That's exactly when you should leave. Let me handle the crisis. I've been handling crises since before you two were writing your first lines of code. Go somewhere remote. No Wi-Fi, no news alerts, just your family. Give me 2 weeks to stabilize things here, and come back ready to actually lead instead of just react." She was right, Jamie realized. They'd been so busy defending their relationship that they'd forgotten to actually live it. "Montana," Damon said suddenly, looking at Jamie. "We talked about buying a place there. Let's go back to Silver Ridge. Even if it's just a rental for a couple weeks. Let's remember what matters." So they did. They left Seattle in the midst of the media storm and drove east, the twins strapped into car seats belting out off-key nursery rhymes while Jamie and Damon held hands over the center console. With every mile between them and the city, Jamie felt something unknot in his chest. Silver Ridge welcomed them back like old friends. They rented the same cabin Jamie had lived in during his pregnancy, and it felt like coming full circle. The first night, after putting the exhausted twins to bed, Jamie and Damon sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the vast Montana sky. "I forgot how quiet it is here," Damon murmured, his head resting on Jamie's shoulder. "No car alarms, no notifications, no reporters camped outside our house." "Do you ever regret it?" Jamie asked quietly. "Coming after me? We could have both just moved on with our lives. You'd still be the celebrated genius CEO, and I'd be, I don't know, living here in peace, raising the kids alone." "Not a single day," Damon said firmly. "Even with all of this mess, even with the stress and the scrutiny and the constant battle to prove ourselves, I'd rather have this life with you than any alternative. You and the twins are my family. You're my home. Everything else is just noise." Jamie turned to kiss him, soft and lingering, tasting salt air and promises. "I love you. I'm sorry I ever made you doubt that. I love you too. And I'm sorry I didn't see how much pressure you were under with the inheritance decision. We're both still learning how to do this, the partnership thing, the family thing, the navigating a hostile world together thing. We'll figure it out," Jamie said with more confidence than he felt. They spent 2 weeks in Montana living simply. Morning hikes with the twins in backpacks, afternoons at the lake teaching Ethan to skip stones while Lily collected interesting rocks, evenings cooking simple meals and reading stories and being present with each other. No news, no social media, no corporate fires to fight. It was exactly what they needed. On their last night, after the twins were asleep, they sat by the fireplace, Damon curled into Jamie's side. "I've been thinking," Damon said. "Maybe we do this more often. Buy a place here, spend summers away from Seattle. Raise the kids with both worlds, the ambition and innovation of the city, but also this space to breathe. Perspective." "I'd like that," Jamie agreed. "I'd like that a lot. And maybe," Damon hesitated, "maybe we also think about stepping back a bit from the company. Not leaving, but delegating more. We built Hartley to prove Omegas could run successful companies. We've proven it. Maybe now we build something else, a family that doesn't have to sacrifice everything for success." Jamie pulled him closer. "You'd really be okay with that? Hartley is your whole identity." "No," Damon corrected gently. "It was my whole identity. But now I'm a father. A partner. A person who exists outside of corporate metrics and stock prices. I want the twins to remember us being present, not constantly stressed and working. I want us to have time for each other that isn't just crisis management." "Then that's what we'll build," Jamie promised. They drove back to Seattle 2 days later, rested and reconnected. The crisis was still there. Clara informed them that 2 board members had demanded a formal review of their business practices, and competitors were circling, trying to poach their top talent. But it felt manageable now, like a challenge to overcome rather than an existential threat. "We've got a strategy meeting tomorrow," Clara said. "Full board attendance required. They're going to push for one of you to step down, probably Jamie, since he's the easier target as COO rather than founder." "Let them push," Damon said calmly. "We're not budging. Jamie and I are a package deal. They don't like it, they can sell their shares." The board meeting was tense. Marcus Wellington, a gray-haired alpha investor who'd been with the company since series of funding, led the charge. "Gentlemen, no one is questioning your talent or commitment," Wellington began, which immediately signaled that he absolutely was questioning both. "But the optics of this situation are untenable. The company has lost significant value. Clients are nervous. Investors are fleeing. Something has to change." "You're right," Damon said, surprising everyone. "Something does have to change. Jamie and I have discussed this, and we have a proposal." He laid out their plan. They would remain CEO and COO respectively, but would step back from day-to-day operations, appointing Clara as president to handle operational management. They would focus on long-term strategy, innovation, and being the public face of the company's values, 2 Omegas who refused to apologize for their success. They would also establish an industry-wide initiative to combat designation discrimination in tech, funded by their personal wealth rather than company resources. "This isn't about running away from criticism," Jamie added. "It's about being strategic. We're taking the attacks and transforming them into an opportunity to lead on an issue that matters." Meanwhile, Clara, who has everyone's respect and trust, handles execution. "We play to our strengths rather than trying to defend positions we never should have had to defend in the first place." Wellington frowned. "And if the market doesn't respond positively? Then we'll have lost our gamble," Damon said simply. "But I believe people want to see leadership that stands for something. We're betting that our values and our vision are worth more than playing it safe." The vote was close, but it passed. They had 6 months to prove their approach worked. The transformation was gradual but steady. Clara proved to be an exceptional president, and with her handling operations, Damon and Jamie could focus on the bigger picture. Their anti-discrimination initiative gained traction, with several other tech companies joining. Slowly, painfully, their stock price recovered. More importantly, they had time for their family. Jamie coached Ethan's little league team. Damon volunteered at Lily's preschool. They had dinner together as a family most nights, and the twins stopped asking why Daddy and Daddy were always working. 8 months after the crisis began, Hartley Innovation was featured in Forbes with the headline, "How 2 Omega Executives Turned a Scandal into a Movement." The article detailed their approach, their refusal to back down, and the ripple effects of their anti-discrimination initiative across the tech industry. "We did it," Damon said, showing Jamie the article over morning coffee while the twins demolished pancakes at the kitchen table. "We survived," Jamie corrected. "But yeah, we did." "Daddy, can we go to Montana soon?" Lily asked, syrup somehow in her hair despite not being anywhere near her head when she started eating. "Summer," Damon promised. "We're buying a house there. Somewhere with a big yard for you and Ethan to run around." "And a dog?" Ethan asked hopefully. "Can we get a dog?" Jamie and Damon exchanged glances. They'd been discussing it, part of their commitment to building a fuller life beyond work. "Maybe," Jamie said, earning excited squeals from both twins. "But only if you both promise to help take care of it." As the twins launched into animated planning about what they'd name their hypothetical dog, Damon reached for Jamie's hand under the table. "Happy?" he asked quietly. Jamie looked around at their chaotic kitchen, their syrup-covered children, their half-finished coffee and the pile of school forms they still needed to fill out. It was messy and imperfect and nothing like the carefully controlled life he'd once thought he needed. "Happier than I ever thought possible," he said honestly. And he was. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't. They still faced discrimination, still fought battles, still had hard days where everything felt overwhelming. But they faced it together, as partners, as parents, as 2 people who'd found each other against all odds and built something worth fighting for. That night, after the twins were finally asleep and the kitchen was cleaned and the world had quieted down, Jamie and Damon stood at their bedroom window looking out at Seattle's lights. "Thank you," Jamie said softly. "For what?" "For finding me. For not giving up. For showing me that being an Omega wasn't something to hide, it was just part of who I am. For giving me a family." He turned to face Damon. "For loving all of me, even the scared, broken parts." Damon cupped his face gently. "Thank you for letting me in. For trusting me with your truth. For building this life with me." He kissed him softly. "We're going to be okay, Jamie. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Together, Jamie agreed, and pulled him close, grateful for second chances, for chosen family, for a love that had survived secrets and scandal and come out stronger on the other side. They'd both spent so long hiding who they were, convinced their Omega natures made them less. But here, now, in the home they'd built and the family they'd chosen, they finally understood. Their strength had never come from pretending to be something else. It came from accepting themselves fully and finding someone who did the same. And that was worth more than any inheritance, any position, any validation from a world that had never understood them anyway. They were home, finally and completely, in every way that mattered.